Hey guys, how's it going? Vincent here, and we're going to be doing a deck profile for Simorgh. The deck is really kind of fun, but it's very linear. It's a very fair deck, but it does have a lot of cool, interesting plays and a very interesting play style based off of tribute summoning. So to start off, we're going to go with 3 copies of Simorgh, Bird of Bringing. This is the one you want to see all the time. Its effect is that when it's normal summoned, you can search any Simorgh card from your deck, so pretty busted. But just like all the other Simorghs, they have an effect where if they're in the graveyard and your opponent controls no back row, they can special summon themselves from the graveyard. However, they get banished when they leave the field. So a lot of recursion, a lot of extra resources for your tribute summoning, pretty self-explanatory on how the deck plays if you've ever played something like True Draco. To follow along with that, we have 3 Simorgh Bird of Beginning. Same premise, it special summons itself in the graveyard if your opponent has no back row. But more importantly, it's its first effect. It can grant you an additional normal summon. Very important when you're trying to get multiple of the larger Simorgh monsters on the board. Extend your plays, and it's really good. More importantly, this is a level 1, which comes in handy with another effect that we're going to go over later on. 2 copies of Simorgh of Calamity. This card's okay. It's a foolish burial for the deck. Usually you want to send a larger Simorgh like Simorgh of Darkness or the Dark Simorgh to the graveyard because they can recur themselves from there. But it's just some setup. It helps you kind of make clunky hands a little better if you send the right piece to the grave. But it's just a name, really. And the other one is not so good. Bird of Protection, it's really kind of irrelevant. 3 copies of Simorgh of Darkness. This one is your recurable boss monster. If you tribute summon a Dark or Wind monster, you can special summon this card from your hand or graveyard. So it has a lot of recursion. More importantly, it has a second effect that when a spell trap is activated, you could quick effect tribute a wind monster, wind beast monster, and then negate that effect and send it to the graveyard. So really cool card. It's also treated as a wind type while on the board, has some small synergies with some of the link monsters, so really good card in general. I'm gonna run the 3 copies of Simorgh Lord of the Storm. This is your second boss monster. It can't be targeted if you tribute summon it by spell or trap card effects, which is really good because with the field spell, it becomes a pretty big body. So if they don't use monster effects, they're gonna have a hard time dealing with it. It has a effect that when a spell or trap card effect is activated, as a quick effect, you contribute a winged beast monster, and then you target a card your opponent controls and shuffle into the deck. So really good spot removal. The targeting is unfortunate, but when you can spin any card, it's a really valuable disruption. And it's really good for a lot of different scenarios. The other effect is if it's in your graveyard and one of your winged beast monsters are destroyed by battle and it's in the graveyard, you can add it back to your hand. So a little bit of recursion, slower than Darkness, but still very invaluable. You need him to activate some of your other spells because it is the only higher wind beast monster. You have 1 copy of the Dark Simorgh. This is a lock. This card can really shut down a lot of strategies, anything that's back row heavy. It's special summoned from your hand by banishing a dark and a wind from your graveyard, or special summon from the graveyard by banishing a wind and a dark from your hand. So either way, there's 2 different ways to bring it out. But locking down your opponent from setting any cards on the field can be a death sentence to decks like Altergeist. Salamangreat will have to, be forced to use their activation cards. Well, they might be sitting on some brick cards if they can't set any rages or roars. So really good card. We're running 1 copy of Lyrilless Cobalt Sparrow. So this card is really good with a 1-for-1. So 1-for-1, if you don't know, it allows you to discard a card to special summon a level 1 monster from your deck. This basically turbos out and gives you more materials for tribute fodder. You use 1-for-1, discard any of your Simorghs because they have the ability to special summon from the graveyard going first. And then once you have that, you can reoccur them from the graveyard. This special summons itself, and its effect is it allows you to add a level 1 monster from your deck, a winged beast. So that searches your Bird of Beginning. So really good extender, really good starter. Fantastic card overall. Run the 1 because you don't want to draw it. Worst case scenario, you do draw it, you can 1-for-1 for Bird of Beginning. 3 copies of the best hand trap in the format. Ash, it hits everything. We already know this. Alright, now for the spells, 3 copies of Elbor's The Sacred Lands of Simorgh. You want to see this card as much as possible on your starting play. It gives you an extra normal summon by controlling a Wind Wing Beast monster. So you can normal summon immediately after the effect resolves. You could also reveal level 5 or higher Wind Wing Beast monster to allow yourself to normal summon with 1 less tribute for those monsters. So it is one of your main extenders, and it also gives the much needed attack boost to your Simorghs because they're just shy of beating over most boss monsters. Makes them about 3200 maximum. Really good card. You want to see it every time. And for that reason, we run, unfortunately, the run Terraforming. Sad to say, it's at 1 now. Another card you want to see or search immediately is Simorgh Onslaught. This card is your main searcher. It's similar to something like Melody of Awakening Dragon. You discard a Winged Beast and add 2 Simorgh monsters with different attributes from your deck to your hand. So you can mix and match depending on what your hand consists of to make sure you can optimize your play. And you could also banish this card from your graveyard on the same turn. Reveal a Winged Beast, and that monster gets its levels reduced by 1. This does come in handy with another copy of a card we're going to go over in just a second. But reducing by 1 for Dark Simorgh allows it to be 1 tribute. And if you use the next card, which is Simorgh Repulsion, this also allows you to reduce the Simorghs by 1 in the graveyard. It'll allow your level 8s to be 1 tribute only. So that's pretty much the optimal play. But we only run 1 copy of Simorgh Repulsion because it's essentially a Go Second card, but it's searchable. You discard a Winged Beast monster and return all spell or traps your opponent has back to the hand. So this allows you to carry on with your plays for your smaller Simorghs, special summons them from the graveyard, and then gives you the tribute fodder that you need. So we only run the 1. It really doesn't do anything going first, and it doesn't do enough banishing itself to optimize any level 1 play, turn 1 plays. 2 copies of Swallow's Nest. I had no idea this card existed. But after doing some research, I'm just trying to find some generic support for this deck. This is pretty good. So you tribute a face-up Winged Beast monster, and you special summon another one from your deck with the same level. Now, it sounds a little counterintuitive because they are all different levels of smaller Simorghs, but summoning the same name copy is just as fine. It's 2 materials off of 1 monster, which is really important to make some of your Link 2s, getting extra tribute fodder on board. And the fact that this isn't once per turn and a quick play spell, you can dodge spot removal if you're forced to go second and you draw this card. Your opponent tries to pop one of your monsters that you want to tribute, you can tag it out for another one. Then the other card will come back and gives you 2 materials. It's really, really good. I'm surprised this card's not limited, but then again, there's not enough Winged Beast cards in the game to make it broken, so good enough. 1 copy of 1 for 1, already went over that, but mandatory for extensions. 3 copies of Pot of Extravagance. We don't really use the extra deck too much, and the Link monsters that you do go into going first are kind of minuscule in importance, so you run a couple of copies of each and you'll be fine either way. You mostly want to end on a board of the larger birds and smaller birds, so it doesn't really matter too much if you banish most of your extra deck, so this is a perfectly good card. 3 copies by Call by the Grave. This is important. The deck is still a bit fragile, so you want to make sure you can stop any hand traps. And we actually lose to Call by the Grave pretty hard. So like if your opponent's going to use that against you, you got to make sure you can retaliate with your own to stop their plays. It's like really just mandatory to get effects going off. 2 copies of Twin Twisters. I main deck these because if you are blind going second and there is a back row deck, you want to be able to deal with the back row so you can special summon your smaller Simorghs from the graveyard. More importantly, this discards for cost, which means you can get the smaller ones into the graveyard or Darkness Simorgh and recur them back without any trouble. The cost is mitigated for that reason. So I don't feel bad in decking these instead of side decking. Really good card. And kind of a staple for the deck. And then finally, 3 copies of Harpy's Featherstorm. This card is nuts. This is a really broken card. So if you control a Winged Beast monster until the end of the turn, your opponent's monsters are negated, their monster effects that they activate. So essentially shuts down almost every strategy in the game, provided that you can get this in your opening hands. The good news is that this deck can easily link into Harpy Conductor, so there's your Harpy name, because if you have a Harpy on board, you're allowed to actually activate this card from your hand, which can catch your opponent off guard, really surprise them. You can kind of bait them into making a suboptimal play or start their combo, slam this down, and then bam, they're pretty much screwed from that point, and then they're forced to pass their turn. So really, really good for the strategy. I really like this card a lot, and I hope they don't limit it soon. Now for the extra deck, 2 copies of High Speed Roid Rubber Band Shooter. Its second effect is a little irrelevant, but more importantly, it's its first effect. Using 2 wind monsters and during your main phase, you can immediately, after effect resolves, normal summon a wind monster. So it's an extender for your other Simorghs. Gives you that extra normal summon without the only gain this once per turn clause. So really good card to extend plays. Easy to summon with your Simorghs recurring themselves from the graveyard. And just an overall fantastic card for that. We already went over the 2 Harpy Conductor. Basically just using as a name for Harpy's Featherstorm. It does have a secondary effect, but it's not really that relevant because you're not going to be bouncing your own Harpy card. So that's there for that. 2 Salamangreat Almirage. This card is good for getting some extra materials on board. Your smaller Simorghs usually can be brought up with this. And then from there, they'll special summon themselves. So you have 2 materials for a Link 2, depending on what you're making. But more importantly, instead of going into the Link 2, you keep it on board because they can protect your monsters from being destroyed by opponent's card effects. So if you want to protect your bigger birds, this is the way to do so. Now to help with the attack points problem of the deck, there's 2 copies of Greyfly. Just an overall good attack booster, helps you close out games when you on your turn 3 and you need extra damage, and has some recurability with the graveyard effect, so pretty good. The 1 copy of Nightmare Phoenix, if there's 1 extra back row that you need to get rid of after Twin Twisters, as long as you can get 2 monsters, this can help out with that. Just you know, you probably won't go going into it often, but since back row removal is the name of the game, you might as well just run this one. 2 rank 8s, 1 Dingirsu, and 1 Hope Harbinger. Hope Harbinger is really good because it could help you get rid of back row cards that are spells. So if your opponent sets a quick play, you have this available to remove that, get that threat off the board, and Dingirsu is just generically a really good card. It's spinning a card on the opponent's side of the field is really nice, whether it be monster or spell trap. So just some options to deal with problematic situations. And now finally, Super Poly targets. Predaplant, Odd Eyes Vortex, Salamangreat, and Starving Venom. You already know these cards. They're just really good for Super Poly. Because you don't care about your extra deck too much, so it's nice to have them. Onto the side deck. We have 3 copies of Anti-Spell Fragrance. This card is the nuts with Dark Simorgh. It pretty much shuts down the entire strategy of Pendulums, Sky Striker. You know, once you see this, Altergeist, once you see this, and then Dark Simorgh, it's a wrap. They can't set their traps, they can't set their spells, so you lock them out of that, and monster effects in those decks can get them somewhere, but usually your birds will deal with those accordingly, so that's a big shutdown card. 3 copies of Frankatops. Again, removal in the back row is the name of the game, so this card allows you to special summon on board, attack over something that's problematic, and then use it to pop another card. It could be a back row, it could be a monster, whatever you're having trouble with, so really mandatory. 3 copies of Effect Veiler, some extra hand traps. I'd much rather Impermanence than Effect Veiler, but I don't have any, so if you have Impermanence, go right ahead. But again, just something to help you with the go second matchup, stop your opponent. 2 copies of the Monarch Stormforth. This is again going second option. You're based off Tribute Summoning, and this card lets you deal with your opponent's monsters while doing so, and giving you that extender. So really good card. Glad it's at 3, but honestly, 2 is good enough. I feel 3 would be a little bricky, because you want to see more extenders and the smaller birds at that point. You don't want to have a lot of big birds in this card. It just won't do enough, so 2 is fine. But what we do run 3 of is 3 Super Poly. This card is nuts. We all know how good it is. Discarding for the cost, again, is mitigated by the fact that your Simorghs can special summon themselves from the graveyard. So it's not really too much of a cost. You don't care about the extra decks, so you're not going to be linking too much. Overall, it deals with your opponent's cards, sets you up your graveyard, and finishes off anything else that you need in between. And then finally, a 3rd copy of Twin Twisters. If you're really facing back row heavy decks, it's super important to deal with those. So having a 3rd copy is always nice to have. And again, cost is mitigated because your Simorghs were born from the graveyard. But that's pretty much it, the deck profile. I hope you guys enjoyed. If you have any comments, suggestions, please leave it down below in the description. Thank you.